an opportunity we have every week just to air some of the things we do in TGS. And people often watch these recordings later and comment or send me information. So I'm sure a lot of people have had a lot of questions for you, Matthew, because you've been helping us with our sales training. I wonder, when did we meet? How did you get to be training for us at TGS? How did that come about?
That's a good question. Well, we met through a mutual contact, Miles Duncan, who's your LinkedIn expert, and I've known Miles now. Miles was probably one of the first people that I met when I first set up Future Sales Factory, which was 2011. And I met Miles in a previous life before his LinkedIn masterclasses. He was actually a marketing director for a drinks company, or contracted to be a marketing director of a drinks company. And I did him a couple of favors, and he got me quite a few free bottles of the drink that he was marketing for. So I immediately decided he was a great guy, you know, so kind of stayed in touch with him. Anybody who gives me free drink is good in my book. And we kept in touch, and I believe Miles has done some work for you on LinkedIn quite a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic stuff.
Yeah, and he's very, very good. And I think he sent me an email and said, Andrew might want to chat. And so you and I had a chat, and I think that was probably about this time last year, actually.
Yeah, exactly. I think we work very much like that in TGS because we're a network. We're aware of the power of networking. So like Miles did some superb and does some superb job with us for LinkedIn. So as soon as we needed some sales training, he's the person I asked for a recommendation, and he recommended you. I guess that's the best sale if you get a recommendation direct from someone. But we think in best of terms, like we're professional services. I wonder what would you say is the importance of getting yourself trained for sales rather than just, you know, using your experience?
Yeah, I mean, so as you know, my background is professional services as well. I was head of sales for an accountancy firm. And one of the things that always struck me when I was in this accountancy firm is the money and time people spend training people to be accountants.
Yeah.
Or any professional practice. You know, is immense. So you've got these guys who went through, you know, years of training to get that certificate to say they were an accountant, and then they would kind of sit them in the office and go, right, now you're an accountant, you can do all this stuff. And I was in a very large firm, so you can imagine it was a bit like a kind of a meat factory. Business came in and business went out, and then the people would get promoted through the quality of their accountancy work. And then they get to a certain level in the business, and it was the level that we in my firm we called it associate director level, which is kind of a senior manager in some other firms. But they get to that level, and immediately they would then say, now you've got a target, you know, now you're responsible to actually bring in income in the first place. And of course no one had ever shown these guys how to do it. They would kind of, well, how? And then we would kind of worry about budgets, and we'd play a little bit, and we'd kind of, you know, as head of sales, I was buying the training at that point, and nobody ever gave you enough money. And the difference in the money for your professional qualification and your actual, what you do on a day-to-day job budget, you know, it was like this. And budget for professional qualifications and no budget at all for commercial training. And people fail because of it. It's not fair, you know. And what happens is people then go, well, I can't do this. And, you know, the expectation grows as the promotion grows, but people aren't set up for it. And Future Sales Factory actually was set up to train accountants, because accountants don't like selling. So that, you know, they won't by choice go and find a sales training course. So, you know, we had to find a way of explaining to people that it is a professional requirement in exactly the same way as your qualifications are.
Yeah, I think you said that. That's really beautifully said. And that's exactly, I've been trying for years to make that point without the eloquence that you come up with there. But really, that's it, because you put your finger on it. It's like suddenly you think, well, you've got to be a salesman and you've got to be an advisor, right? And they think, well, that's just a given. But then we've got to give the people the tools to become that and learn how to do it. And when we've been following your courses, the 6 sessions we've had, it's fascinating every time how much it's clear and it rings a bell. And yet it's a discovery at the same time. And I remember last month, we were talking about the 6 buyer motivations. and it's just a real clarity. So we re-looked at how we talk about TGS on our website instantly about that, because we think, of course, this is, we've got to be aware of other people's perspective. It's just great, you know?
Yeah. And it makes sense as well. This is the thing. It's one of the things where we started in Future Sales Factories. We started with logic. So I saw very clearly that your average accountant, the people who work for me in the accountancy firm, they weren't emotional people.
Yeah.
They were logical people, and it kind of goes with the territory, right? And we had these people who were very, very, very good at what they did. What they were very, very bad at was explaining what they did to other people in a way that would gain the business. And the first thing that I realized was that, you know, these people they had this fear of sales. They didn't like, because they didn't understand it. And anything we don't understand, we're scared of, right? In any part of life. They didn't understand it. They just thought it was magic. There's oh, you can do it, Matthew, but we can't, type of thing. And I said, well, let's break it down. You know, let's have a look. What is it that I actually do for us at first hand? And it was our strapline, as you know, is first handshake to first invoice. It's kind of the first time I use that. First handshake to first. When I meet somebody for the first time, what do I do? And how many times do I have to do it? And how long does it take before I can actually get to invoice them, which is the whole reason why I'm shaking someone's hand in the first place. And buyer's motivation is a massive part of it, because we buy in different ways. And if we try and sell in the way that we buy, then it's luck. Great salespeople don't sell on luck; they sell on process, and it's all logic and it's all process, and that's what people need to really understand.
And that's exactly what, I mean, everyone likes that kind of security, and accountants and auditors and tax and legal particularly, because you say, well, it's a process, do the process and you'll be successful. But I think what we found, I've just come out of our intern, Justine, the previous intern. She's just had her, she's presented her master's paper. And it was interesting that it came up that the TGS environment, because we're kind of a startup, we've got a very supportive atmosphere where we encourage people to take risks, and we don't mind if they fail. But what we want to do is to learn about the failure. And I think that's what you say, the kind of higher you go up in an organization, the less you want to fail. So if you haven't learned how to sell, you don't want to show that you can't do it to get better. And that's very difficult, isn't it? It's the fear factor.
Yeah, and do you know what? And failure is part of the evaluation. You know, it's great salespeople always do. The horrible thing is, the horrible truth of the matter is that sales is actually a fairly boring job, because you do the same thing again and again and again and again. And I always find it really interesting that if you ask any salesperson who's in any industry who's doing well, and you say, why are you doing well? And their answer will start with I have a great relationship with my clients. I do, you know, I've understood their needs. If you ask the same salesperson a month later when they're doing badly, why are you doing quite badly? It's somebody, you know, it's the recession, it's COVID, you know, the market's on its back, you know, all of this kind of stuff. And if you think about that, therefore that there has to be a disconnect. That has to be an untruth. So actually, sales isn't about the person; it's about the process. I have some of my other clients. Lots of my clients are people like accountants. So we've got accountants, we've got lawyers, and software developers as well. And software engineers are brilliant people, because they think in code. They think in, and we call it the sales algorithm with them. And one of the things that they said to me, which was really good, so they have a department in this particular client that I'm thinking of that debugs software. So what they do is they get a piece of software that doesn't work, and they basically look at each line of the software code, and somewhere in the line there's a bracket in the wrong place, or a letter, and it's just, you know, it's black and white for them. If that bit's there, it just won't work. So they find that and they go, that's the bit, and they take it out. And I say to them, that's what you do with sales. You go and have a conversation with a client. If it doesn't work, debug the conversation. Which part of it actually was where it went wrong, and how can I change? And you can't do that unless you've got a process, because if you're just doing something different each time, you don't know which part doesn't work.
And that's exactly it. And I suppose that looking for the bugs in sales terms, it's really listening, isn't it? Because you've got to listen to what's happening. And we do that experiment, because when we call prospects, or we call people, I'll ask the interns are listening in often, or they're in the same room. So I'll say, okay, when the call's finished, say, okay, what type of buyer was that? And they think, oh yeah. So they say, relationship. And really it does format. You think, right, well, that's great. So that orients the way you can approach for the next time. It's Fascinating.
And you start to build almost a repository of, if I meet this type of person, then this is what I need to be doing. And again, as I say, it's the sad part of it actually makes it's almost, doing the same thing again and again and again.
Yeah.
You've got to be consistent, because if you're not consistent, you can't identify which bit works and which bit.
Exactly. Yeah.
I've said this to your people. Say this to people all the time. A great salesperson will ask a question of a client, and they'll pretty much know what the answer is going to be, given a few parameters. And if I ask this question and they give me that answer, I'm going to go down that route of the flow chart. And if they give me this answer, I'm going to go down that route of the flow chart. And it becomes, and I've got, as you know, because you said it to me, I've got clients who start to recognize, once they've known me for a little while, they start to recognize which part of my sales process they're in. I had a client this morning, he sent me an email, actually, a client this morning, booked some dates for September, has, at the bottom of it, he said, you can now put me onto your next stage.
That's excellent, yeah.
On the board, can move me from that whiteboard to that whiteboard, because he knows where he is on the whiteboard. But
it's great. It's great, really understanding. And I think as well, so it's something that, I mean, it's repetitive. It is repetitive, but it's only repetitive if you know you're repeating, and then you can refine what you do. And then it's there's a fun in it, in getting even better at doing it and being more attentive. So in terms of, I mean, these kind of morning sessions are just a way to say hello and give a kind of bit of wider exposure. But if you had one piece of advice for anyone who was wanting to be better at selling their service, what would it be? I know that's a pretty wide thing.
What a question.
Sorry.
That's okay. Be inquisitive. Being inquisitive is a really, really important part of sales. And I don't just mean in the questions you ask. We all know that questions in sales are important, right? Yeah. But I also mean, one of my greatest phrases, and I use this I might even copyright it, is there are more conversations that happen about you when you're not there than happen about you when you are there. So when you're dealing with a client, I have a conversation with you, and then you go away and have a conversation internally about me, and I'm not there.
Yeah.
So what I need to do in order to manage that conversation is I need to be inquisitive, and I need to put myself in your position and say, what is Andrew doing? What's he saying? What's the conversation? Which bits of the information that I've given him has he picked up correctly? Which bits of the information has he picked up wrong? Because if you go, you've got to be my advocate. So if you go away and have a conversation with somebody else and you haven't understood what I've said, then the next person in the line isn't going to buy.
Yeah. Or they're going to think you're a nutter when you speak to them again, and you say, well, that's not what you said, because that's not what he said you said. Yeah.
Exactly. So you've got to being inquisitive is great. So you've got to really sit down and think, when I'm not there, what's happening? And build that play in your mind and go, right, okay, Andrew's now going to have this conversation. This is what he's going to say. This is who he's going to say it to. This is where the problem might start. Yeah. This is how I can fix the problem.
Excellent. So it's a question of widening your perspective as well, isn't it? That's fantastic. Well, excellent, Matthew. Thank you very much. Matthew Quinn from Future Sales Factory. Thank you very much for tuning in. And if anyone wants to sign up, TGS people, if you're watching, the next course you should know by now, but it's on the 15th of September, so you've got all summer to prepare, and I'll be sending you emails to harass you, to follow the work that's done before, to do the homework that you were asked to do as well. We're working on ours for the questions to ask prospects, so that is longer than 5-minute question that you gave us in the last session. Working hard on that. I'll put a link also in the description box here about where you can subscribe. And if you're not a TGS member, maybe there's a way you can get in touch with Matthew. I'd thoroughly recommend it if you wanted someone to train you how to do sales. I'll put connections to your social media and your contacts there as well, Matthew. And that's it, basically. Thank you very much, Matthew. What's your new motorbike arrived yet, or is it on the way?
It's here. It's sitting outside the office.
And you're in the office.
And I'm in the office. It's actually sitting outside the office. I picked it up on Saturday.
Great.
I'm delighted with it. If anybody who thinks of buying a new motorbike, the Harley Davidson Pan America is fantastic. There's only 2 in Scotland at the minute. I've got one of them, and it is an unbelievable machine. I love it.
Time out, and that's a good promotion about how good a salesperson you are, Matthew. Okay. Yes, but thank you very much. TGS Live most Thursdays. I don't say every Thursday because it's live and we can't get it together all the time. This is pre-recorded, but it's broadcast live, if you see what I mean. So if you've got any questions, post them in a box. Matthew, super to see you, and we'll see you again in September. Have a great summer.
And you. See you soon, Andrew. Thanks. Bye.